Hello, everyone. Welcome to our program this evening on the End Times, Israel, and Biblical Prophecy. We're really happy to have you. And we would like to ask you, if you would, to please subscribe to our channel. If you're watching us on YouTube or if you're on Facebook, press like and feel free to share as well. And don't forget to press the notification button so that you'll be able to know each time that we go live. And you can see the program that we have. We have a really good program this evening. We'll be taking a look at Ezekiel Chapter 38 and 39. Very interesting prophetical information that pertains to us in the days that we're living in. I have a really good friend. His name is James Kaddis. He will be sharing with us. He's the pastor of Calvary Chapel of Signal Hill there in California. And so I'll be presenting him in a few minutes. But first, our registrar wanted me to say to all of the students, congratulations, because you're all doing your homework and you are all doing a great job. So far, you're getting a passing grade, and we are very proud of you. And she also wanted me to remind you to continue to read the book, What the World is Coming to by Pastor Chuck Smith. And don't forget to keep notes, and it's not due yet. It's due at the end of the course, but we don't want you to get behind. So if you would continue to do that, that would be great. We want to welcome everybody who's watching this evening from different parts, Peru and California. I see Idaho, and thank you so much for joining us this evening. So I want you to keep your eyes on the Middle East. Some very, very interesting things are happening there. It seems like Iran is continually provoking Israel, pushing them to respond. And we know that if there's a response, this could lead to a major conflict in the Middle East. And so we want to pray for the nation of Israel, pray for the peace of Jerusalem, pray that the people of Israel might know the Prince of Peace, who we have come to know. It is so important here in these last days that we would be interceding for the people of God. You know, it says in Genesis chapter 12, I will bless those who bless you, God promised Abraham, and I will curse those who curse you. I don't know about you, but I want to be blessed. And so we want to support and pray for and encourage and support the nation of Israel, especially here in these very, very perilous times. So, I would like to introduce you to Pastor James Kaddis. Again, he's the pastor of Calvary Chapel of Signal Hill, California. They're near Long Beach. We've been friends for a number of years. He is very supportive of the work here in Peru, and we are just so blessed to have him this evening. And so I always like to say that he is my Egyptian friend. I have a special fondness and admiration for the people of Egypt, having visited that country. And so, marhaba, habibi.
I love it. I absolutely love it, my brother. That's great. That's good Arabic right there. That's very, very good and very discernible, by the way. Very discernible. I love it.
I practiced all afternoon, James.
You know what John won't tell you is I think we've been friends now for close to 25 years. Wow. It's been that long. I actually knew John Bonner before he actually went to Peru. And it's amazing to see what God has done. And you always had an interest in missions and always serving the Lord and always been an inspiration to me. So I'm absolutely blessed that I can be here, and it really truly is an honor. It's a true blessing.
Oh, it's truly an honor for us to have you, James. I know you're crazy busy all over the place, and
yes.
And we're just so happy to have you this evening for an hour. I really thank the Lord for that. May I pray before we get started?
Please.
Okay. Lord, I thank you so much for this opportunity to study your word and to study the prophecies from Ezekiel chapters 37 and 38. I pray that you would open our minds and open our hearts, that we might understand and see exactly the days that we're living in today. And thank you for bringing Pastor James into our lives, into our hearts, into our ministry, and into our screens tonight. And I pray that you would teach us, Lord, and use him for your glory, I pray. In Jesus' name, Amen. Well,
Amen
Pastor,
and amen.
you have 2 chapters to cover, and I don't want to take any more of your time. And I know that this is going to be so significant and enlightening, especially in what's happening in the world today, especially in the Middle East. So please take it away.
Yeah, it's funny. I just wanted to confirm one thing, John, because when you opened up in prayer, you had mentioned 37 and 38,
Oh,
and I thought we were doing 38 and 39. I just want to make sure.
it's 39, 38 and 39. So sorry about that.
Here, there for a minute. Okay, well, listen, let me just simply say this. There is no way in the world that we can do justice to Ezekiel 38 and 39 in a 45-minute period. So I'm going to recommend some resources that you can go to where you can get some great at-length teaching. First and foremost, you can always go to our YouTube page. That would be Calvary Chapel Signal Hill. And we would, of course, love you to subscribe and actually also hit that bell that Pastor John was talking about. And so we've got all of the Ezekiel studies there. If you don't find them there, if you go to calvarychapelsignalhill.com, in the audio section, we've got all of the Ezekiel studies there where we go through it. Also, I want to give you another resource that I think will be of great help to you, and that is this website, educatingourworld.com. Once again, that's educatingourworld.com. That's Don Stewart's website, and you ready for this? For all of you guys, every single one of his books will be available to you for free. Okay, he has roughly 61, 62 books that are out there. Every one of them will be available via audiobook very, very soon. My team and I are the ones that are building that website for Don Stewart. We've had it up for years now, and we have had millions and millions of people visit that website and download those books. They're available for free. The whole purpose is for the kingdom and for the glory of God. And that's why we're doing what we're doing. And we're really thrilled to be able to make that available to you. And he has an incredible book on the battle of Ezekiel 38 and 39, where you can get all of that information. Again, it's available for free. And I would highly recommend that you go there and get it, because we are going to it will do lots of justice. Now, what I thought I would do is that I would talk about a little bit of an overview concerning Ezekiel 38 and 39. And then basically when I give you that overview, which I think I'll be able to just nail in a few minutes, then we'll talk about some of the specific prophetic implications tied to what Ezekiel 38 and 39 actually shows us. And there's a lot there. And then when I'm finished, what we'll do is we'll talk about some things going on with the Al-Aqsa Mosque and things that are happening in the Temple Mount. You guys are going to be blown away when I show you this article right here that I've just switched over to. You will be blessed to see what's actually going on and what this article is about, but I'll hold off on showing you that until we finish what we're talking about with respect to Ezekiel 38 and 39. And there's a lot going on there. So if you were to look at Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39, it speaks to us of an attack that is launched against Israel. The details of that attack are given to us, of course, in chapter 38. And in chapter 39, we get more of the details of God defending Israel and doing what he promised that he would initially do. Now, Ezekiel 38 and 39 is really remarkable because when you look at it, first of all, there's lots of facts that we should know about it, okay? Let's talk about it, a few of the facts of Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. First of all, we know that there will be a significant attack launched against Israel while Israel is in a place of peace and prosperity. Now, we know that because the beginning of Ezekiel chapter 38 makes that very, very clear to us. We also know that whoever it is that will be attacking Israel, and we'll talk about some of the players involved that will be attacking Israel, we know that they'll be doing it because they want to be able to obtain the natural resources and all of the wealth that Israel has actually attained. Now, that's a very, very, very significant fact, and it should be significant to you because you'll understand the fact that God has been blessing Israel. It has been blessing Israel significantly, and I think I think that's an important thing to note. So it's something that we should be talking about, And of course, what we can do as on top of that, when I talk about that, John, and I don't know if any of your folks can do this, but if we can get a picture put up of the African continent that's got a good outline of all the states, I would love to put that up while I talk about some of the nations that are going to be involved in Ezekiel 38 and the fight that we see there. I think it would be good, and it would help people to understand a little bit when we start talking about the peace treaties, what I would call the peace treaties, or the what we actually call normalization agreements. They're not peace treaties, they're normalization agreements, but they are significant with respect to the Ezekiel 38 and 39 battle. John, you look like Pastor John, you look like you wanted to ask me a question. Did I get that wrong, or
No, I just wanted to show my face.
Okay. Awesome.
I'm sorry. We're working on the map of Africa right now.
Yes, and I think it would be a good thing, because we really do want to spend a few minutes talking about why this is so significant and why this is so important, because there are some really unique and really powerful and really interesting things that you'll be able to surmise by simply looking at an African map. And it is really, really interesting to have a discussion about some of these things. And as a matter of fact, you know what I'm going to do right now? While I can, I'm going to go ahead and I am going to I will do this myself. I'm going to take a screenshot of a good map that I can actually put up myself. And this is kind of on the fly. But I'm going to do it because I think it'll be a good map for us to use. And I will take that map and copy it over into my graphics, and we'll talk about it. As a matter of fact, what I'll do is I'll bring it up right now so that we can have a conversation about it, and we'll actually go from there. So let me switch that over right now, and it'll only take a second. Modern technology is so wonderful.
We do have one on the screen. Will that work?
You know what's really funny? It's almost exactly the map that I was actually looking at. So that works out quite perfectly. Yeah, no problem. That's good. So there's a lot to actually talk about here. When we look at the battle of Ezekiel chapter 38, we understand something very, very important. And this is critical, right? We need to know, first of all, who's attacking, why they're attacking, and everything that's going on. Now, I've already talked about who's attacking. Why they're attacking. We know about that. Ezekiel really does expound upon it substantially for us. We get a lot more insight regarding that issue. But the other thing is, we need to talk about many of the people that will be attacking, right? So let me read a portion of Ezekiel chapter 38 to you. And then as I do, I think it will help to shed some light upon what we're talking about when we start getting into this text. Okay, so let's read Ezekiel chapter 38. I'm reading from the King James. I always do. Forgive me for that. Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 1. It says, "And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, Son of man, set thy face against Gog, the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him, and say, Thus saith the Lord God, Behold, I am against thee, O Gog, the chief prince of Meshech and Tubal, and I will turn back and put hooks into thy jaws, and I will bring thee forth, and all mine army, horses and horsemen, and all of them clothed with all sorts of armor, even a great company with bucklers and shields, all of them handling swords, Persia, Ethiopia, and Libya with them, all of them with shield and helmet." So we already know who is attacking here. This is not a very difficult picture to be able to draw. We know that we are talking about Gog, who would be the leader of Russia in essence, right? The leader of the land of Magog, which we would be talking about Russia, Meshech, Tubal. We're all talking about, let's name some of the nations here, okay? First of all, we're talking about Turkey. We are talking about Iran because we see Persia here. We're talking about Libya. We're talking about Ethiopia. We're talking about the area of Sudan because we see Gomer and all of his bands and the house of Togarmah we see, and all of his bands and many people with thee. And so we see all of these people. We see amongst them, as I mentioned before, we see Libya, we see Ethiopia, we see Turkey, we see Russia, and there are also other countries that are in and near that region that will also be taking a run at Israel. They will all be doing it together. Now, this is very interesting because a lot of people, even 15 years ago, or 6 or 7 years ago for that matter, would have told us that this is an impossibility. There's no way in the world we could see any kind of an attack concerning this. There's no way that that can happen. And the reason why oftentimes people said that was because they said that Iran joining up with those that are like Russia and Turkey and so on and so forth, and positioning themselves in a place like Syria is virtually impossible. There's no way in the world that can actually happen. And so one of the things that's really critical to understand is that all of that's changed. When we look at the last 5 or 6 years, we know that Russia and Iran are working very closely together. They have had summit meetings in Syria. And did I mention that Turkey also has jumped into there? If a lot of people were to asked me many years ago, they would go to me and they would say, well, James, are you worried about ISIS? And oftentimes I would say the same thing. I would say, no, quite frankly, I'm not worried about ISIS. I'm truthfully more worried about Iran. And I'm more worried about the minority of Muslims because of what the Bible actually says. And people say, James, that's completely crazy. There's no way in the world that can even be the case. Iran is the minority of Muslims. They're less than 5%. The Sunni, which is the majority of the Muslims, are 95%. And, I don't even, you're crazy. How can you even say that? And of course, my answer every time is, well, of course, I'm worried about Islam in general. I'm worried about anybody who calls themselves a fundamentalist of Islam, because if you're a fundamentalist of Islam, then that means you're a fundamentalist of the Quran. And if you're a fundamentalist of the Quran, then you mean you really do believe in death and murder and slaughter and everything else that falls into line with all of these things. And so, of course, I'm concerned in that respect. I mean, when the men drove their airplanes into our buildings on 9/11, they were not just going around going la 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 la. They were saying things like Ya ilaha illallah wa Muhammad Rasulullah. They were praising their false god and saying the things that they were saying. And of course, it's remarkably wicked. And this is not anything that we don't know, guys. I mean, this is something that we've known for quite some time. And this is Islam. But I'm more worried because of the things that I read I'm more worried about Iran because of the things that I read in Ezekiel chapter 38 and 39. Now, here's the thing. Let's talk about the motive for just a second with the battle. And this becomes very important when we talk about the motive of the battle, because we're going to talk about this African map in just a second and talk about why it's so spectacular. And then I also think we should talk about those people who will be dissenting concerning these things. So let's jump forward to that for just 1 second. We'll look at those that'll be the dissenters of this battle. That means people who are going to come against it. And so it says in verse 13, Sheba and Dedan and the merchants of Tarshish with all the young lions thereof shall say unto thee, art thou come to take a spoil? Hast thou gathered thy company to take a prey, to carry away silver and gold, and to take cattle and goods, to take a great spoil? So we know that there will be people, this is amazing, people who will actually be coming against this battle. And had I said this, which I did many times, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, had I said that Saudi Arabia and the people in the Gulf states will be dissenters of this battle, they would laugh at me. They would say no way that Saudi Arabia and many in the Gulf states would actually stand up for Israel. Now, what is interesting is we know, based on what Ezekiel chapter 38 tells us, is that they will be speaking with their mouths. They will be dissenting concerning this, but there is no indication that they are going to be participating in any type of battle. And that's kind of interesting. They're not going to get involved militarily. It would appear that what they're actually doing is that they're having a comment with respect to their disgust concerning, or their dissent concerning this attack that'll actually be taking place. But what is very interesting is to see how quickly Turkey has turned. Turkey, even as recent as a few years ago, was actually friends with Israel, and now they're beginning to turn the tide as it relates to all of that. And then it's interesting to see how many other nations have also done the same thing in favor of being close with Russia and aligning themselves with Russia, which, by the way, is, again, it's you cannot make this kind of stuff up. It's absolutely unbelievable. Now, let's talk about why I say Israel is going to be in a place where they are where they are wanted for all of their spoil because they are acting in peace and everything is well. Look what it says here. And this is interesting. He says, after many days, after many days, thou shalt be visited in the latter years, and thou shalt come into the land that is brought back from the sword. And notice this, and is gathered out of many people against the mountains of Israel, which have always been waste, but it is brought forth out of the nations, and they shall what? Dwell safely, all of them. Thou shalt ascend and come like a storm, and thou shalt be like a cloud to cover the land, and all thy bands and many people come with thee. It's very interesting. He goes on to say, thus saith the Lord God, it shall also come to pass that at the same time shall things come into thy mind, and thou shalt think an evil thought. Well, what is that evil thought? What is the evil thought that these dissenting nations are going to be thinking, led by Gog, or I believe the leader of Russia? What is the evil thought they're going to be thinking? Well, here it is. It says, and thou shalt say, I will go up into the land of unwalled villages. By the way, when we talk about unwalled villages, that means we are talking about a place that completely believes it is walking in security. And we're actually beginning to see more and more of these unwalled villages in Israel because their greatest defenses are things that don't involve walls. They, of course, involve something even more interesting, and that is the use of things like the Iron Dome. Right? So this is very, very interesting. And so we're already seeing this come true. But when we talk about unwalled villages, these can also be taken as metaphors for a place that is actually peaceful. And by the way, regardless of what the news media might tell you, and they are fake news media, Israel is much safer. You go to downtown Jerusalem right now, it's much safer than being in downtown Los Angeles or downtown Philly or downtown Miami or downtown any of our major cities that are in the United States of America. It's much more safer. You go down Ben Yehuda, it's a lot safer than walking down Main Street or going down Skid Row in Los Angeles. Much more safer. And so when we're talking about this kind of peace that Israel is experiencing, they're doing it. And notice what it goes on to say. He goes on to talk about unwalled villages. He says, I will go to them that are at rest, that dwell safely, all of them dwelling without walls and having neither bars nor gates, to take a spoil and to take a prey and to turn thine hand upon the desolate places that are now inhabited and upon the people that are gathered out of the nations, which have gotten cattle and goods and dwell in the midst of the land. Now, this is interesting because what we are describing here, what the Bible is describing to us, is a nation that appears to be self-sufficient based on all of the resources that they have. I mean, literally, these people have everything that they need, and that's exactly what we're witnessing taking place in Israel right now. They're the number one exporter of fruit all over the world, okay? They are number one in technology. No one does technology better than them, including medical technology. They may be the very first country known to man that has developed a complete cure for the coronavirus, even though you could do it with hydroxychloroquine and all kinds of other stuff. I'm not even going to get into those ridiculous politics, but we'll just leave that alone. Israel has come up with incredible resources to make them independent, including energy independence. They are finding oil everywhere, which of course is another remarkable advancement of Israel. They are absolutely going towards the road of energy independence. And actually they're getting to the point where they're going to start selling their oil. Forget the fact that they're energy independent. They're going to start selling their oil because they have so much of it. And while all of that is going on, we're beginning to watch other things surface. Like, for example, Erdogan of Turkey is going around the Mediterranean coast and claiming that he has found lots of oil, when in reality, all of his people have not found any oil. As a matter of fact, they're going on an illegal scavenger hunt of the area, hoping to be able to find oil, but they've had no such luck. Russia is getting remarkably angry because of some of the issues that are going on with China and Saudi Arabia. And within that little tiny triangle, Russia is having a much more difficult time being able to take their oil pipeline across the way, even through the land bridge, to start selling oil resources and receiving oil resources from certain countries strategic to their actual growth. As a matter of fact, that's why President Trump was so hated by the Chinese, because President Trump was blocking all of that nonsense. And this is why Joe Biden is so loved by the Chinese, because he is opening up the door to all of this evil. And so it's very interesting to understand this and to look at this and to see this. All of this is coming into fruition. And it's getting to the point now where these surrounding nations are becoming remarkably desperate. They are getting just frustrated to no avail. They're losing their minds concerning all of this. And they're beginning now to posture themselves, even politically, against Israel and against some of the allies of Israel, because they are right now in what I would like to call the jealous phase of the resources that Israel has obtained. But it's going to go beyond that in just a second. And it's going to get to a very ugly phase where they are going to I guess I would say translate that jealousy into a bold move to come against Israel. And that's going to happen as we see it in chapter 38. Now, this is the thing that's even more interesting than that, are these normalization agreements. Now, if, and I'm going to do this myself, I'm going to zip over to this map of Africa, because I'd like us to stay there for just a second, because there's some good stuff that you'll actually see here. And I want you to notice some of the nations that are listed here that have actually made a peace treaty. Now, we've talked about some of them, right? We've talked about the UAE. We've talked about Qatar. We've talked about some of these other nations that have signed normalization agreements. Let me just first simply say that none of these nations could sign a normalization agreement with Israel if there was not permission given to them by the Saudian family. Okay, the royal family of Saudi Arabia would have to sign off on any of these agreements being made in order for them to be made. But there are some other ones that are quite interesting. For example, Morocco. The implications of Morocco are pretty unbelievable. When Morocco jumped on, they jumped on before Joe Biden came into office. And I believe they did that out of desperation, knowing full well that their only ability to be able to receive any kind of assistance with military equipment or financial subsidies would come by committing to the normalization agreement now, thus obligating the United States of America to provide the kind of money that they need to build some of the infrastructure that they have. Now, there are some really interesting things that go there, because if you look at Morocco, and Morocco, of course, we're talking about Northwest Africa. When you go to look at Morocco at that top edge, right below Spain and right next to Algeria and so on and so forth, you'll see a place called Western Sahara. And that area is very interesting because there are some contentions from a military perspective with respect to the bottom border being protected and Morocco's fear of expansion of that border, whether it be in or out of that particular subset that exists right now. So they did this for a very specific reason, but it's very interesting because it also was an inspiration back and forth from what the Sudan did. Now, by the Sudan being positioned where they are, we know that they are going to be one of the people with Libya that is going to come against Russia, or is going to come against Israel, not Russia, forgive me. And a lot of people have asked, how is that going to happen if Sudan has signed on to the normalization agreements with Israel? How in the world is that going to be the place? Well, think about it, guys. I just read it to you. In Ezekiel Chapter 38, these nations that are going to be attacking Israel are going to appear to be friendly nations. Remember, their walls are down. They're unfenced cities. Israel is going to believe that everything is secure and everything is fine, and they're going to have normalized agreements with so many people that are out there. A lot of people make the mistake of assuming that these normalized agreements are the covenants that we read about in Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. Not true. We don't know that for sure. Could be, could possibly be. We don't know. But what we do know is we know that these normalization agreements are going to make it much easier, by the way, for people to have these types of relationships with Israel, so that when this battle begins to rage and it does what it does, folks, you've got to understand something. It simply opens up the door for the kind of attacks. Now, some of you might say, well, how in the world is a nation like the Sudan going to participate from the south? We're talking about an attack from the north and a conglomerate of nations. Well, if you guys have been paying attention, if you've been watching any of my videos, you would have seen this. But you know that Sudan just signed an agreement, this was maybe about a month ago, with Russia to actually put some bases, and we're talking about naval type installations on the coast there of Sudan. So this is all very interesting stuff when we actually think about it. And these are all the type of things that would seem to tell us that what we're about to experience in Ezekiel chapter 38 is formulating. It's coming up right now, and it's pretty incredible stuff. So in summary, what Ezekiel chapter 38 basically tells us, 38 and 39 tells us, is that we are literally going to watch Israel being attacked by lots of nations, right? By Libya, Ethiopia, Sudan, by Russia. Russia's going to be kind of the leader of that, right? We know that Turkey is going to be involved in this. Of course, we know that there will be other nations that may not necessarily be mentioned, but kind of in that region that will also be attacking. And one of the things that's really interesting, even beyond that, is to recognize the people that will be dissenting. And we've talked about that, right? We've talked about Saudi Arabia dissenting. We've talked about other nations that surround the Gulf that will be dissenting, which is remarkable. And it's pretty powerful when you think about this. So we're looking at all of this happening. And then here's the part that's spectacular about all of this. When the attack takes place, based on what we know from chapter 38 and chapter 39, God himself will be the defender of Israel. We're going to watch that happen. It's going to be spectacular. We'll be raptured by then. I actually believe that the rapture will take place before we see these battles happening. And I think that it has to work out that way. That's just kind of my thought process. Now, some might disagree with me on that, but I think I can make a reasonable argument for why that is actually the case. So that's the summary of what we're seeing right now. And I also just want to simply say, as we've been talking about this, that we are watching the Lord do some pretty amazing things right now. God is putting together so much right now in our world, and it's actually amazing. And I think if we've got a few minutes, I'm going to just spend a few minutes to talk about why this is so incredible, because it's all coming together. Based on Ezekiel 38 and 39, we should expect these Abraham Accords. Not that the Abraham Accords are in Ezekiel 38 and 39, but we know that there are normalized relationships between these nations. So this is all exciting stuff. And when we talk about Bible prophecy happening now, guys, I want you to understand what we're talking about. We're talking about the fact that there are things that are being put in place that are taking us to that moment that we know is going to happen. God himself is the one that's orchestrating all of this and putting this together. Now, I want to go over this article. This is an interesting article. I think you guys will be blessed by this. And by the way, I did 2 videos on this subject. I did a live video on this subject at CalvaryChapelSignalHill.com, or Calvary Chapel Signal Hill's YouTube page. You can go over there. And again, you could subscribe. It was the most recent live update video that I did, where I talk about this at length and what's going on. I also did a video on this on YouTube that is roughly about an 8-minute video that talks about the significance of all of this. So I'm going to be very brief about this summary so that we can open up for some questions and answers. But this article is a pretty interesting article. This article tells us that there are people from Saudi Arabia now that are saying the Temple Mount and Al-Aqsa, which is the mosque that's on the Temple Mount, is not important to Islam. Now, guys, you can go back and you can read this article. I think that they're going to make that available to you. And I will also say, quite importantly, that when you do grab this, you should look at it in its entirety. Again, I would recommend that you go, this is on Israel Today's website, this article, but I would recommend that you go to our YouTube page and listen to the extended analysis. By the way, will be released tomorrow, analysis that both Don Stewart and I also did on this particular subject. We spent our whole half-hour radio show on this, and we're making it available to you guys on video, considering the times that we're in. So I think you're going to be blown away by that, and I think you're going to really enjoy that time. But what's basically happening is, by them saying this, guys, you got to understand, this is significant, because ever since the Temple Mount has been placed into contention in the midst of Jerusalem, the Muslims have always said it was their holy city. It's been the hustle of the last 100 years. And they've been saying, oh, this is our holy city. This is our holy city. This is a very holy site. And now there are people, even people tied to the royal family in Saudi Arabia and some of the influential sheikhs, and even some of the people who are influential in pop culture, that are now coming out and saying, no, this isn't significant. And that is important because I personally believe in my heart that the dome that you see in that picture, it's called El Haram El Sharif. That's what we say in Arabic. You don't ever want to call it by the Dome of the Rock. That's very offensive to Muslims, and it's not good to unnecessarily offend people. Leave it to me to say that, right? But this place, this Golden Dome, I believe is going to be taken down. I believe it's going to be mowed down. I believe the temple is going to be built directly upon that site. Now, there are some people that'll say, oh, it's going to be built slightly north of that. Some people actually will go as far as to say, well, no, it's not going to be built north of that. Some people say it's going to be built way south where the city of David is, which I completely disagree with. I think it's a hugely erroneous conclusion to actually say that. And then there are some people who are like me and Don Stewart and several others that believe it's going to be built on the exact site in which it was built before, which I believe is going to be this Golden Dome, where the Golden Dome is. Now there's a movement amongst people all over the place, which is pretty amazing, where they're saying it's not so important. I can give you a great example of this. This is somebody who is very, very influential in Israel right now. This guy is an interesting person. Look at what he actually says. Let me tell you what the original post is, and then this guy corrects him. Somebody who's a member of the Saudi family, I believe. But this person, his handle is Abdul Mafara. His name is Abdurrahim Al-Farah. And he says, hey, look at the new pictures of occupied Jerusalem, the capital of Palestine. Now, one of the most influential people in Saudi Arabia, right? Khalid Al-Qur, he comes in and says, hey, look, it's the eternal capital of the Jewish people, and then offers a hashtag in Arabic that is pro-Israeli. Listen, I have to pause there for a minute, because I think it's something that we should just think about for just 1 second to understand how impossible this way of thinking was to me even 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago. But to say that now there's a large contingent of Arab Muslims that are supporting the eternal capital of the Jewish people being Israel, or being Jerusalem, is something that's been unheard of. We've never seen this before. We've never, ever seen it before. It's remarkable. Here's another one, right? Look at this. This is very, very popular. Another popular person in culture here. He says, dear brothers and sisters, join the Saudi hashtag. And this is the pro-Israeli Saudi hashtag. And then he goes on to say, this recent Saudi Twitter movement believes that there is no importance of the Temple Mount to Muslims. And notice this, and the waiting for the Jewish third temple. A new era, one of peace. And he throws a picture of God rebuilding the Jewish temple in that holy site. Now, this is not the kind of thing that is even fathomable to the average person. This kind of thing is completely, this is crazy, because we know what the Bible has told us concerning these things. And I've always had these discussions with my friends who teach prophecy. I always tell them the same thing. Look, you guys, I know that the Bible teaches this stuff. Look, I get it, right? And I believe every word of what the Bible teaches, but I just don't understand how God is going to do it. And now I'm beginning to realize I know the answer now. God is beginning to form and fashion it this way. That's the way it looks. And it's amazing because you can't make this stuff up. I mean, really, as you look at it, it's mind-boggling. I'm looking at this and I'm just thinking, oh my goodness, I cannot believe that this type of stuff is happening right now. And it's taking place. And folks, let me just give you the summary of all of this, okay? Jesus is coming soon. Make no mistake about it. There's nothing that has to happen biblically in order for Christ to not return. Folks, he can come back at any moment for his church. And it's a pretty amazing thing. It's a pretty remarkable thing. That's what the Bible tells us. And it's something that we should be excited about, you guys. It's something that we should be thrilled about, and something that we should definitely be looking forward to, because his return is imminent, and it's time that we start living like it and getting involved in. And actually, for those of you guys that watch any of my videos, if you ever do watch any of my videos, that's the reason why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. That's why I'm fighting against abortion. That's why I'm spending a lot of time dealing with many of the political issues of the day, because I want to stand up for what's right. I want to be found being faithful to the Lord as we approach these final days. And when the Lord comes for his church, I want him to look at me in the midst of trading his talents instead of burying them. And more than ever, that's what we need to be focused on. And I think you guys have a great example, by the way, in Pastor John, because that's what he's doing right now. He's making a difference. And I think that that's something all of us need to be doing for the kingdom of God, because, guys, time is running out. So maybe we could take some questions.
Sounds good, Pastor James. I have a couple of questions for you. And just wanted to mention that we're really excited here in our studio, everything that you're sharing.
Wonderful.
Yeah, it's just like it's coming to pass, just like we've been watching for so many years and waiting for it. All of a sudden, right before us, it's happening. Question that I have is you mentioned the I need my glasses. I'm sorry. The normalization agreement. Is that the same as the Abrahamic Accord?
Yes, they are what everybody is referring to as the Abraham Accords. And as a matter of fact, a little kind of a side note, if you do go to Calvary Chapel Signal Hill's YouTube page, I did an interview which was remarkable. I interviewed the highest ranking diplomat in the United States representing the nation of Israel. He's the Consul General of Israel. His name is Dr. Hillel Newman. He's an Orthodox Jew, but the interview was fascinating. And he was one of the most instrumental men in the process of the normalization agreements. And we talk about that quite a bit. Now, I will make this one comment about these agreements. We call them normalization agreements because they're not peace treaties, okay? There's a big difference. You have to be at war with a nation in order for them to be called peace treaties, okay? So we have had 2 peace treaties with Israel in the last 50 years or so. The first one was in 1979, of course, with my ancestors, right? The people of Egypt, if you'll remember that, right? And the second peace treaty was in 1994 with Jordan. After that, there hasn't been any activity for the better part of 20 some odd years, and then now we have seen a plethora of normalization agreements where diplomatic relationships are now being formally established with these nations for primarily economic purposes, which matches up perfectly with Ezekiel Chapter 38.
And can you tell us why Saudi Arabia especially would have normalization with Israel?
So this is a big one, and I would just simply say this. The easiest way to summarize this is to say it's all about Iran. Yeah. It in essence has really nothing to do with the diplomatic prowess of the Trump administration, although it was strong. And what Trump did in 2017 when he met with all of the Arab leaders was world history. I mean, it was amazing. And he was able to create what I like to call the geopolitical shift that was necessary to allow these Arabs to recognize the fact that the Palestinians were getting in the way of their economic boom, were getting in the way of their normalization, which would bring them more security, safety, materials, and so on and so forth. And so predominantly the people leading this understanding would have been Saudi Arabia, would have been Dubai, would have been many of these other nations, because they're understanding that their economic beneficiaries are the ones that are the most important for them. And President Trump was brilliant in that, telling them, listen, we will promise the Palestinians the whole world. We'll just do it. And he went to Netanyahu and he said, Bibi, just trust me. Let me just offer the whole world to the Palestinians, because I know they're going to reject it. And that's exactly what he did. He offered East Jerusalem. He said, we'll put down discussions about this. We'll do here, we'll do there. And of course, the Palestinians did exactly what Trump said he would do. And they bogged on it. They said, forget it. We're not doing this. It's a waste of time. Let's not do this. And so again, as a result, then the surrounding nations looked at that and said, oh, no. You know what? We're not going to let the Palestinians get in our way anymore. Let's enter into these normalization agreements.
So the the unimportance that the Temple Mount has to Saudi Arabia, how far-reaching is that? I know it's very important for the Palestinians living within the frontier of Israel, but do you think, James, that Saudi Arabia can give the word and that the Dome of the Rock can be demolished?
Almost virtually, yes. I think
Wow.
that there's a big part of that. Now, the Turkish government will have something to say about it. I think that there will be some real disagreement there, which is why I still think that whoever this final Antichrist is going to have to be brilliant enough to be able to broker that kind of peace. And I don't think we've seen a world leader yet that's sophisticated enough to be able to bring Turkey into this, to accept it, because of the financial investment that the Turkish government has, in particularly the Golden Dome, and the claim that they lay on that area, the area that we would actually call or refer to as the East Gate. There are regions there that are very, very complicated with respect to diplomatic operations. But I think that the normalization agreements that have been set up are going to make it a lot easier to use back channels with some of those nations in order to get to Turkey. I actually think that Russia might be instrumental in that possibly happening, with whoever that person is who's going to be the Antichrist. Now, we're not going to see them. We're not going to know who they are, because the Bible says that Christians have to be raptured first in order for the Antichrist to be revealed. We can base that on 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verse 3. But what is interesting to know is that I think you'd have to get Turkey to really sign off on it. And, at best, the relationship between Saudi Arabia and Turkey is touchy. We'll just say that. We'll just say it's touchy at best, is what I think. So it's going to be an obstacle that we're going to have to face. But it is interesting that Saudi Arabia is the one leading the charge and saying that the Temple Mount is no longer significant to Muslims. And it's even more interesting the fact that so many Muslims are jumping onto this and saying, yeah, they're right.
Yeah. That's just amazing.
It is.
Incredible. We've never anticipated some kind of a statement like this before.
Oh, it's blown my mind, John. It's blown my mind, especially when you think about the Golden Dome. Everybody thinks the Golden Dome is the big deal, right? It's not. They think it's the big deal because they always see, the picture of, that dome, right? But you see the mosque that I'm pointing at right there? That's Al-Aqsa. That's right. The one that's the more significant one to them. That's the one that they say is their most holy site. And unfortunately, with the Golden Dome now, let me come a little closer. That dome right there, they think that's the main deal. That isn't. What the main deal is back over here, right? And I think that's the bigger issue. And the statements that are being made is they're not even talking about Al-Haram al-Sharif. They're not even talking about the Golden Dome. They're spending a lot of time talking about the insignificance of Al-Aqsa, which is remarkable. It's something that I never thought I would ever see that.
James, we have a couple of questions from our students. My brother Steve is asking the question about, let me see. It's about the Antichrist. Does Ezekiel 38 come first or the Antichrist? What do you think, James?
Difficult for me to say. I say that they could probably be simultaneous. It's hard to be able to tell. My guess is we see Ezekiel 38, 39 probably happen first, or the Antichrist probably happen first. I don't know for sure. Very, very difficult to tell. I think you can make a reasonable argument both ways. But I do think that the battle of Ezekiel 38, 39 is probably one of the first events after the rapture that ends up taking place. And then I think we begin to see the development of the Antichrist and so on and so forth. But people look at it both ways and can make reasonable arguments for both ways. Either way, I think that they both definitely come after the rapture.
Right. So that's the most significant event for us as believers. It's the next event, the rapture of the church. And so that's most exciting. Alex has a question for you. Will God defend Israel in a supernatural way?
I think in a combination of both, right? I think in a combination of both, because it says in Ezekiel chapter 39, he says in verse 2, he says, "And I will turn back and leave but the sixth part of thee, and will cause thee to come up from the north parts, and will bring thee upon the mountains of Israel, and I will smite thy bow out of thy left hand, and I will cause thy arrows to fall out of thy right hand, and thou shalt fall upon the mountains of Israel, and all thy bands, and all the people that is with thee, and I will give thee unto the ravenous birds of every sort, and the beasts of the field to be devoured." So this is very interesting. this is God using a supernatural construct to create something that looks very natural, if that makes any kind of sense. He's going to use nature to destroy these people. So it's a combination of both, of course.
Very good. Now, in Revelation chapter 11, verses 1 and 2, John is giving a measuring stick to measure the temple, and the Lord tells him there to leave out the area given over to the Gentiles. Bart Garibrandt from Arizona is asking a question. Can you give us a better understanding of that verse? Maybe
Sure.
it is thought that they would build the temple right next to the Dome of the Rock, or Et Sharif.
Yeah, Bart, it's a great question, and actually, it's interesting because I actually thought that before. That was actually my view, and I based it on Revelation chapter 11. But as I began to look at it very closely, I kind of hit myself in the head, and I said, "Why in the world am I thinking that? I mean, that's crazy." When you look at the construct of the temple originally, there was always a courtyard that was created for non-Jewish visitors. There was a Gentile arena, and we actually saw this being emphasized in Herod's temple. Okay, so John would have obviously been talking about the picture that he understood and knew from Herod's temple, and what basically God is saying is he's saying leave out the measurements of the area that would have been made available to the Gentiles. So it's kind of interesting that's the picture. I just think it's simply talking about the temple proper. I don't think it has anything to do with the Golden Dome. And actually, I think it's physically impossible to build the temple to the north of the Golden Dome. You would have to throw away many of the outer courtyard portions, and then the pass through from the east gate to what you would call the other side of the western entrance, where the western wall is, would almost be impossible to position there if you were to position it north, because if you were to go into what they called the east gate or the east entrance and you came out, you would go to where the Antonia fortress is, and that just wouldn't work. You'd have to demolish half that portion of the western wall. I think that would just wouldn't work. And I also do think that it's going to be built on the exact same location, which is why I do say it's the Golden Dome. But in Revelation chapter 11 is a good passage that people use to refer to that. But Ezekiel mentions this also, and I believe that what we're talking about is we're talking about the Gentile, the courtyard that was dedicated for those that were Gentiles.
Pastor James, would you mind letting us know again where we can find your videos? I see them all over YouTube.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yes. So there are a few places you can go to. You can go to YouTube and then just type in Calvary Chapel Signal Hill, and that is our YouTube channel. And we'd love for you to like and subscribe to us and hit the little notification bell. And then I also have another YouTube channel called Real Hope with Tom and James, and that's where me and Tom do all of our prophecy updates together. On the Calvary Chapel Signal Hill, that's Real Hope with Tom and James. On the Calvary Chapel Signal Hill YouTube channel, you'll also find the videos that I do with Don Stewart as well. Now, if you forget any of this, you can go to calvarychapelsignalhill.com, and we'll always show you our YouTube accounts, our Rumble accounts. Would love for you to personally subscribe or follow me on Instagram. You can do that as well. You can go to Instagram, and I'm right there. I'm just at James Kaddis. Very, very easy. And it's pretty simple. And then if you find any one of those, every single one of those will show you where all of our other websites are that you can go to, and you can learn more about everything, including educatingourworld.com you can find.
Mm-hmm. I must confess to you, James, that you are one of my major resources of information. And,
praise the Lord.
Yeah, just want to...
It's humbling, actually. It's humbling.
Want to say thank you because you provide so much information. You and Tom together, you and Don Stewart together, and I'm just so grateful. And again, that you would be with us this evening. You know, we have about 2 or 3 minutes remaining. I was wondering, you know, one of the things that Ezekiel talks about is that that Israel will be living in the land in peace. And yeah. I'm wondering, you know, the prior chapter 37, talks about the valley of dry bones and God bringing his people back into the land so that they would be living in peace in those unwalled cities. Would you like to make a brief comment about that, maybe?
Oh, it's incredible. It falls along the same lines of what we read in the book of Amos. This passage in Ezekiel chapter 37 is heavy. It's incredible because when you read Ezekiel chapter 37, it describes to us God taking a nation that in essence had no life. It had been dismantled, literally taken apart. There was no nation of Israel, literally dead. Right? And then God breathing it back into life, wrapping flesh around the bones, bringing it back to life. Significant of the fact that God would reestablish a nation of Israel. And he has literally done that. He's doing it. When you go and you look at Amos, I think it's in Amos, very last chapter of Amos, it tells us that God will plant them back in their land, right? Never to be taken away again. And so the Bible tells us that God would reestablish a nation of Israel, and he did. He's done it. And they're continuing to grow, and God is blessing them. And this is something that we know that the Bible teaches us. And Ezekiel chapter 37 is literally has been fulfilled and is continuing to be fulfilled as God is strengthening the nation. And again, the next step is going to be what we read about in this battle that takes place in Ezekiel 38. But yeah, it's amazing. And I'm glad you actually brought that up because it is a significant portion of Ezekiel in understanding that before a nation can be attacked, it has to be resurrected.
That's right. That's right.
It does that. It's pretty amazing.
It is amazing. So Ezekiel 37, you see this valley of dry bones representing the nation of Israel. They came together, and yes, Alex, that is the supernatural work of the Lord. The Lord breathed breath into them, and here, since May 14th, 1948, we have the nation of Israel established in her own land once again, as prophesied in the book of Ezekiel. And then they went through a series of wars. They went through the War of Independence the very next day, on the 15th of May. And no one thought that they would be able to survive, but the Lord was with them. And then we have the War of 1967, the Six-Day War. And again, everyone thought that Israel would be demolished. That would be the end of this new fledgling nation. But God gave them land again, more land. And then the War of Yom Kippur in 1973. And so there have been, and the same results. Each time they take care of their enemies and they possess more and more land. So we kind of see a build up here, don't we, James? Up to the battle of Gog and Magog here in chapters 38 and 39. We've seen evidence of God being with the nation of Israel, giving them victory, and then this final ultimate war, they're going to be victorious over their enemies there. It's just amazing.
It's unbelievable. It's like nothing any of us have ever seen in our lifetime. Nobody has ever seen this in our lifetime. And so it's incredible. It's like nothing we've ever seen.
It looks like we have another question, James, from my brother Steve. He says, James, are you hosting your radio show during this presentation?
So this is kind of interesting. It's kind of hard to keep track of all the radio stuff. We're going to update our website to show where the radio is because we are now. This is kind of funny. We got removed from a radio station here in Southern California recently, but what's amazing as a result of that is God has blessed our ministry, and we're on so many radio stations now that I don't know how many radio stations we're on. As a matter of fact, this is really interesting. We are on now almost 550 radio stations in 46 states. So actually, no, I think it's 48 now. I think might be 49 because we just got on Alaska. I don't know, but I've lost track of them. So there could be a radio show going on right now that I'm not aware of. We have literally hundreds and hundreds of radio shows that are playing every single day, and I've lost track of it. But God's been so faithful; He's been so good to us.
James, Pastor Kevin Ballard from Calvary Chapel, Inverness, Florida. He has a comment that I want you to know that your podcast with Don Stewart has been a blessing to me and my church. Thank you for your faithfulness in studying and proclaiming God's word. And
God bless you, Kevin.
And then Carl Schnell from Lima, he has a question. How does the week of Daniel 9:27 in the middle of the week of the 42 weeks of Revelation 13:5 relate to the war of Gog and Magog? Is there a relationship there?
I don't think there is. I don't. Some people say that there is. I don't believe that there is. It's very interesting because Daniel 9:27 really speaks about the covenants or a series of covenants being strengthened. The Hebrew word there is strengthened. Some people oftentimes mistake it for being made. They're not being made. They're being strengthened, which means that they actually exist. So the mechanism described to us in verse 27 is a tool or a utility of the Antichrist, I like to call him the final Antichrist. I stole that from Don Stewart, who is coming in and actually creating a peace. So I actually think that what we read in Daniel 9:27 is not going to be during Jacob's trouble or the Great Tribulation, which is the last 3.5 years of the 7-year period. I think that we're going to see that happening probably within I would have to think within probably the first year of the tribulation. And I think that actually, let me say this, it kicks it off actually. According to Daniel chapter 9, verse 27, the tribulation actually starts, not the Great Tribulation, but the 70th week of Daniel. That's a better way of putting it. The 70th week of Daniel actually starts with the peace treaties being strengthened. And that's a fact. And just by reading the scriptures, that's what you know. So that 7-year period, the 70th week of Daniel starts then. A lot of people think that the church gets raptured and then that's the start of it. No, there could be years after the time that the church gets raptured and that 70th week of Daniel actually starts. And it may be actually years. Very hard to tell you because the Bible's very silent about it. But we are able to establish timelines. Really, we can establish a direct timeline from the time that the Antichrist sets himself up in the temple and demands to be worshipped. And we can tell you exactly what's going to go on from that point. And actually, even then, that might be a little iffy because Daniel talks about an interim period of time after the 70th week of Daniel and before the millennial reign. So that could even get tricky. So when Jesus says that even I don't know the day or the hour, there's some credibility to that, right? So it's important to kind of think that through. But yeah, going back to that, I don't think that that's going to be the case there with respect to Daniel 9:27. It's a great question. A really good question, by the way.
Thank you, Carl. You're a blessing to us. And Pastor James, I can't thank you enough from the bottom of my heart for your participation this evening. You've enlightened us all, and you are a tremendous blessing to the ministry here in Peru, as well as God's work throughout the world. May God bless you and your wife, Nicole, and everything that he's doing in your family. Our prayers are with you and want to say thank you.
Thank you, bro. And we love you so much. And I know Nicole says hello and she wants you to know that she loves you. And everybody at Calvary Chapel Signal Hill loves you very much. When you come back to the United States, we have to get you in church, all 3 services, to tell everybody about what's going on in Peru. We got to do that sooner than later.
Thank you, James. I would love to do so. Thank you.
All right.
God bless you. And to everyone who's watching, thank you for tuning in. We love you all. And we'll see you, Lord willing, next week if we're still here. Shalom.